Thanks for that introduction. I sound very loud. Am I very loud? It struck me the contrast between the first speaker. John is a foremost expert in this and that. Chris works for Gnip. That's about right. What I'm going to do, it's actually interesting listening to John's talk. I'm going to talk about kind of the other side of the equation. He was talking about developing your API strategy. I'm going to talk about what happens when a business model really works and how it can impact the world with the right API strategy. So just a quick check with the room. How many folks, before that nice introduction, had heard of Gnip? It's better than usual. So we are the world's largest provider of social data, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of in that context. So I want to give you a little bit of perspective what it means when I say we're the world's largest. As was mentioned in the introduction, we know that our data ultimately is flowing into the decision-making processes at over 95% of the Fortune 500. So if you are using some kind of dashboard or some type of analytics that is showing social data, say from Twitter or Foursquare or Tumblr, there's a very high probability that that data is flowing through Gnip's system. We work with companies our customers are in 31 countries. It's pretty fascinating to think in just a few years how much of a global industry social data has become. We deliver about 4 billion social activities every day. It's kind of an astonishing number. So anyway, that's kind of where when I talk about what's happening and how the world's taking advantage of social data, what I'm really going to talk about is what our customers are doing with this, so you can get a sense for how an API strategy gone right can impact the world. So we were formed about 5.5 years ago, really with this idea that we thought social data would have unlimited value and near limitless application. And the world would spend a lot of time unleashing that value and building these fascinating applications. And we wanted to be the company that was going to fuel all that innovation by having the most reliable, sustainable, complete data solutions. It sounds pretty straightforward, but to put things in perspective, 5.5 years ago, the first time we got access to the Twitter fire hose, it was 6 tweets per minute. So we were pretty far ahead of the curve in terms of thinking about unleashing the power of social data. It's taken a while for the world to catch up, and now obviously it's accelerating at 4 billion activities a day, and with sites like Twitter, we see peak traffic at the 30,000 tweets per second, so it's really accelerating. So we're going to unleash unlimited value and limitless, near limitless applications with social data, but how do you start? And I just want to pause for a second to talk about how some of these companies have thought about their API strategy, and as we talk about the goodness that can be derived from them. So one of the questions that we get is, why did Twitter partner with Gnip 3 years ago? What were they thinking? I remember at the time that the press release came out, there was basically 2 reactions. 1, why is Twitter selling their data? And 2, who the hell is Gnip? Why did they partner with this little company in Boulder, Colorado? I won't bother answering the second one. I can answer it afterwards. Basically, it comes down to is we were really persistent. But on the first part, what was really lost was why are they selling the data? The focus was on selling the data. What was missed was that Twitter recognized that their public APIs, which were generally built for kind of cool consumer use cases, were very different than this whole other spectrum of needs that big companies and corporations and brands all over the world needed, which was this high fidelity, full coverage experience with their data. And Twitter's a company that wants to build a great consumer experience. They're going to build an advertising business. They have all of these things that they're focused on. They recognize if we can get our data into brands and brands can start making business decisions on our data, that ultimately will have great effects for us in terms of the likelihood that those brands will actually engage on Twitter, the likelihood that they'll actually advertise on Twitter. All those kinds of great things can come from getting our data out there. But it's not a direct connect. It's not, hey, I'm changing my sales process, thus for I'm going to buy this ad on Twitter. It's not that direct. It's kind of a second order effect or a third order effect. But today we can say that 95% of the Fortune 500 are consuming this type of data and are fundamentally changing their business processes on top of the data. And we do believe that has a huge impact for these types of companies on gaining traction, engagement, and on things like advertising. So you're going to change the world by making this data available, but obviously this is a very big umbrella. We're calling it social data. These are very, very different platforms with different attributes and different characteristics. So how do you think about starting to break down this data so that you could actually do something with it? And I'm just going to talk about one really simple example today of how you can start to kind of tear this apart and think about getting the right mix of data to make business decisions. So the first one is reaction time. So as you look at platforms, how quickly do they react to events? And in some cases, are they event-driven at all? I think we all recognize Twitter is a very fast response system. If something happens, you know about it on Twitter first. On the other end of the spectrum, if you think about something like blog comments, they are going to be very slow. First of all, somebody has to write a thoughtful blog post. Let's assume it's thoughtful. And then people have to comment on it. It's not a fast source. So as you're thinking about building stuff on top of social data, one of the questions to ask is how much is speed an element to what we're trying to solve? Because there are many business use cases. We always think speed is good. There are many business use cases where speed does not matter at all. In fact, most of what you're looking at is historical data, and so it's not relevant at all. The second piece is kind of the depth of the content. So again, using Twitter as kind of the one extreme to this, Twitter is very concise, and it has many wonderful characteristics of it being concise. Twitter is a lot about what. It is not a lot about why. So on Twitter you get this sucks, this is great, this is an image. Versus some of these other platforms, something like YouTube, you're obviously getting very rich content about how someone might feel about something or think about it or deeply analyze something. So you put them together and you start getting this idea of, hey, maybe I can start to mix data to find the right, solve the right business problems. Now again, we're just looking at two very simple dimensions, but this is kind of the heart of it, is what happens when you start to overlay business use cases on top of this kind of mix of social data. Fascinating things start to happen. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of simple use cases kind of on the extremes, and then we're going to actually jump into some real-life examples. So the first one is PR crisis management. This was one of the very first things that people started to do when social data became available in kind of this full fidelity form. And what I mean by full fidelity is I can get everything that I care about, right? If you're going to do PR crisis management, you really can't afford to miss that post or comment or like that is made by the person who has 10 million frequent flyer miles or whatever it happens to be. And so PR crisis management, it is all about speed. So let's assume you're a consumer electronics company. You've just come out with a new cell phone. You put the cell phone out there, and suddenly somebody's talking about their battery catching on fire. You don't really care how they feel about that. You just need to know battery fire, that's bad. So you need to react very quickly. The idea here would be, let's engage with this person, let's get them a new cell phone, and before this becomes something that's on TechCrunch, then we're actually going to turn this into somebody writing a great blog post about what great customer service we have. It is all about speed. It's not about the depth of the content. On the other end of the spectrum would be something like product development. Same company, you're building the next gen of your cell phone, and you want to really understand and look at long stretches of historical data, maybe from product launch until current day, what the world has thought of your product and your competitor's product. This is not about speed. Again, in this case, we're actually looking at stuff that happened long ago. What you are looking for is deep sentiment, deep understanding of what people said they loved and hated about your products and what they loved and hated about your competitors' products. And so you can start to think about what problem am I trying to solve, and then what are the best sources to try and solve them. So just to go just a little bit deeper, I'm going to talk about this element of response time in an overly simplistic example and somewhat dated, but I like it because it's just so simple to understand. And this is something that happened almost 2 years ago. This is when things were not going well at Netflix, and they had an after-hours earnings call where they said things were not going well. And what we're looking at is social data response, basically starting at opening bell the next day, to how different social platforms kind of reacted to the news. So the first one I'm going to point out is this light blue line. This is Twitter. And what you can see, this is basically just within minutes of the opening bell. And what you can see is there was an enormous spike very, very quickly within minutes. Now, if you looked and tried to do some kind of analysis of what were people saying, they were all basically saying the same thing. They were saying what? And the what they were saying is Netflix opens down 40%. It was pretty straightforward. There wasn't a lot of emotion to it. There wasn't a lot of feeling. It was just very factual. It was very quick, and it died off also very quickly. You know, oftentimes on Twitter, a few hours is a very long story on Twitter. Now, by comparison, this next line, this dark line, is blogs. In this particular case, we're looking at WordPress blogs. We provide all WordPress.com and much of the WordPress.org Firehose capabilities. So what we're looking at is the reaction on blogs. Now again, in blogs case, people have to actually write them. They take time. Blogs are these wonderful monologues where people are, oftentimes will provide a deep, passionate view of what's going on. So if you looked at the content on the blog side of things, you got a lot of, here's what went wrong, here's what it will take to get back on track, right? You're getting a lot of deeper perspective and analysis on what's happening at Netflix. What's interesting to look at is kind of the half-life of this. The half-life of this peaked actually after the closing bell. So, right, this is not about getting some kind of quick thing, right? Hedge funds aren't going to trade on blogs. But you're getting a lot of deep content. And then the last curve, as you might expect, is the comments for the blog. So obviously you have to write the blogs before you can have the comments. And then people, now we're getting a dialogue going, right? It's not just the initial blog, but people are reacting to that. And the reaction to people's opinions is oftentimes more powerful than the original opinion. And if you look at this, the peak of this actually happened the next day. So it's not about speed. The second thing I want to talk about, just in terms of kind of this response time piece, is thinking about whether your business use case is around expected events or unexpected events. So here we're looking at two natural disasters. One is an expected natural disaster, which would be a hurricane. Hopefully you're not surprised by a hurricane in today's world. And the other one is an unexpected event, which is an earthquake. And we're looking specifically here at the reaction time around Twitter. And what you can see is the reaction curves are quite different, not surprising at all. But in the case of a hurricane, in the case of, we'll get to her in a second. In the case of a hurricane, you see a buildup over a long period of time as the hurricane is approaching. And then it basically, this peak kind of represents landfall. And then it trails off after that. The actual blue line is the real activity after it's kind of before it's been normalized. And what you're seeing there is the troughs are night and the peaks are daytime, right? So there's a buildup and then there's a tail off. And then in the case in the earthquake, of course, there's no activity at all, and then there's a giant spike when the first tremors hit. Okay, so obvious, why does this matter? Well, again, as you're thinking about what problems you could solve, the question to ask is, am I trying to solve problems that I expect to happen, or are things that I cannot anticipate? Because they're very different, the reaction curves are different, and so you'd want to build your analysis different, right? If you're doing a marketing campaign, there's some element of that is expected, right? The build up to the iPhone 5S launch is expected, so you'd want to start monitoring the activities well in advance. And many times you see it's shocking how often the conversations start well in advance of the actual kind of peak of the event, versus something unexpected, which are many cases. The PR crisis management example is a great example of an unexpected kind of business use case. Okay, so that's great. What do we actually do with this? So I'm going to talk through just a couple of examples of what people are doing with this data and how it can be really powerful, and in hopefully ways that you haven't thought about before. We'll see. So the first one is a product development use case. This is a real image. I had to explain to my wife why this was on my laptop. This is a real image from Tumblr. It was posted by an independent fashion photographer. She posted on her personal Tumblr. I just completed a photo shoot. Here's an image from an upcoming line at Urban Outfitters Citronella Dreams line or something like that. Now, what's fascinating about this is that this exploded on Tumblr. So just within a few hours, you had tens of thousands of reblogs. And in Tumblr's world, if you're not a Tumblr user, a reblog is basically someone's way of saying, I identify with this. This represents me. Now, Tumblr is very big with the younger crowd. Certainly a high female population. You had lots of young women saying that they identified with this dress. If you call that a dress, I don't know what that is. So it's a what? Oh, I guess that's not that important. So what do you do with that? Now, I'm going to talk about some hypothetical things that Urban Outfitters could do with this. I don't know if Urban Outfitters is even aware of this image. Anybody here from Urban Outfitters? These are hypothetical things to think about the power of this. And by the way, important to note that based on our data science, this image appeared nowhere else other than Tumblr. So let's think about some kind of normal business processes that Urban Outfitters has. They need to do product development. They need to decide what they're going to manufacture that they think will sell. Well, they have some pretty incredible feedback now. Perhaps they haven't even manufactured this item yet. Perhaps they're testing the market, right? This may be the world's best focus group here. They're getting incredible feedback from a highly targeted audience on how they feel about a particular item. Or maybe they have decided to manufacture this, and now they're rethinking inventory and how much they need to manufacture. They can also look at where, based on geo, they can also look at where the reaction to this is, which could impact their supply chain in terms of where they're shipping items to. So it's not your typical, hey, this is a chance for us to sell something, advertise more. It's an indirect business use case that potentially could have massive impact for any manufacturer, in this case in the fashion industry. The next use case is a national retailer. We did a pilot with them along with Esri, who, if you don't know Esri, world's largest GIS provider, to do a study that we basically said, let's set up virtual geofences around each one of this retailer's stores, and let's just see what we can learn. And let's study lots of different data types and see what people are talking about and what can be derived from that. And the learnings were fascinating. And the most fascinating thing about it was how you can take existing business processes that have been solved years ago and add this new lens. And the new lens is, what does the world think about this? What does the world think about this at a particular moment in time, and more often than not today, at a particular location? And what they learned was fascinating. So let's take inventory management. Now, this retailer has probably had a handle on inventory management for 20 years. They know what's on the shelf and what's not on the shelf. But now, through social data, they know what's not on the shelf that people care about, that they're complaining about, that they're going to go across the street to their competitor to buy. Or in some cases, this new lens tells them that their inventory system is incorrect. Because even though the inventory system is technically correct, that the item is on the shelf, what they don't know, and this extra set of eyes, this new lens shows them, is that the item is on the shelf, but it's on the wrong shelf. And so people are saying, I can't believe they're out of Pampers size 5, and the inventory system says, no, we're not out. But the reality is it was misstocked. It's in the wrong place. People can't find it. There's an old expression about library book that's misplaced is lost forever or something like that. It's the same idea, right? Which is if the customer can't find it, it might as well not be there. It's an entirely new lens. Other fascinating things, it turns out that when people steal stuff, they like to turn to Facebook and Twitter to talk about it. I don't know why that is. You would think petty theft would be, petty thieves would be smarter than that, but whatever. The last case, actually, I'm gonna throw in a bonus use case, but the last slide use case is around a large industrial parts supplier. Now, I love the fact that we have large industrial parts suppliers using social data. We tend to think about social as being, oh, well, big consumer brands. So when we know industrial parts suppliers are using social data, then we're winning. At least in our world, we're winning. If you are this particular large industrial parts supplier, what you care about a lot is where is the next factory going to be built, or where is the next Walmart going to be built, because it is a chance for you to sell stuff. Now, in the old days, oftentimes the world was left to let's wait for official government documents with the city or county or state or federal government to be filed, and then we will know and we can start selling. But the reality is the world knows, many people know way before the official documentation is filed. And social can provide an interesting lens on that. So I don't know what percentage of city council blogs are on WordPress, but I bet it's a lot. And oftentimes on the city council will just report their meeting minutes. Oh, there was a representative from Walmart that was here that's talked about how they were surveying the area, right? Well, that's pure gold for this sales team because they know way in advance, way before official documentation is filed. Or maybe somebody is tweeting from the city council meeting and saying, hey, I'm sitting next to a representative from Walmart, and I'm thinking about kicking him out of the meeting, or whatever it happens to be. But the point is they get this intelligence way before any kind of official documentation happens. So it really can change their entire sales cycle in terms of when they can engage. The bonus use case I'm going to talk about that I don't have a slide for, but I was inspired by the industrial piece, is a manufacturer of an industrial fryer. So these guys make industrial fryers that they sell to restaurants to fry stuff. And they are very interested in studying social data around where their fryers are located in these restaurants. Why in the hell would they care what people are saying around the restaurants where they sold a big industrial fryer? Well, they've determined, in addition to the diagnostics they get from the fryer that connects to them, one of the amazing diagnostics is the social data lens, because when people start talking about the French fries being extra greasy or soft or soggy or whatever it happens to be, that's a very good indicator to them that the industrial fryer is ready for maintenance. So it's this new lens on how they can do maintenance around an industrial fryer. Again, like the more bizarre, geeky, the better. So that's kind of the heart of the content. I just wanted to share one real life experience that happened to me that I think really kind of highlights the power of what we can do with this data. So about 6 months ago, I had one of the best professional experiences of my life, which is I got a after hours, behind the scenes, 3-hour tour of the Library of Congress. So if you haven't heard, the library has all tweets from all time, except for the last 6 months. They're always like 6 months behind. That's work that Gnip has done. So we work with Twitter and the Library of Congress to make that happen. And they needed something from us, so I took advantage of it and said, great, I want a tour. And it just so happened that I was getting in DC at like 8 o'clock, so they opened up the doors at 8 p.m. and I got this behind the scenes tour, which was amazing, and I have lots of fabulous pictures to show from it. But one of the things that struck me is the area that I enjoyed the most was the manuscripts area. So you have crazy, fascinating stuff. You've got George Washington's diaries, and you've got these cryptic like hand drawings from Alexander Graham Bell. It's like this is the first known drawing of a telephone, and it looks like something I would have done on a bar napkin. It's like a guy with 4 fingers, and he's holding up a big thing, and this is Alexander Graham Bell's first drawing of the telephone, and he was sending it to like his mom. I mean, it was just hey, I'm thinking about this idea. And as you're getting the tour, they say, yes, we have 55 million manuscripts cataloged that we can find, and it's just a fascinating set of data. But what struck me when I got back to the hotel that night was it's 55 million, mostly from famous dead white guys. Twitter alone represents 450 million a day from across the world. And we oftentimes think about reaction time and what can I do with, oh, I don't care what you had for lunch and so forth. We often think about the business use cases that will impact us now, but how will medicine be changed 75 years from now when we have this incredible archive of what people were doing and what we're thinking? We're literally sitting on the largest archive of human thought that has ever existed. And what we're now doing is unleashing the power of that archive on the world. Thank you very much.